Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. I hope you're all doing very well today. I have got a full competitive league for you in replay form for the first time ever on this channel. We've done individual replay matches ad nauseum in the past, some of which have been individually drawn from competitive leagues. We've done a full friendly league in the replay format. We have done plenty of competitive leagues now at this point, well, 3 to be exact, but still, one match at a time, live commentated. So this is a first. We're doing a full, all-in-one video replay of a competitive league, and I'm going to not be lazy with my editing, so I'm going to try to show you everything. We're going to show you the sideboarding, we're going to show you each game without me clicking back to the game log so you can see how many games there are, and sometimes spoiling things that way. So we won't be doing that, and we're going to get right into it. But first we're going to thank one of our oldest patrons, Teddy Kaiser. Teddy Kaiser has been with us from nearly the beginning, one of the OGs, and Teddy has edited his pledge. He is now a member of the tier list here. Tireless Teddy is what we're going to call him from now on. So, very, very insightful commenter as well as a very generous supporter. So thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate it. And if anyone out there would like to support this content, which I dare say has some fairly high quality to it and some fairly high frequency to it, if you like this deck, if you like seeing this type of content, you know what to do. Patreon.com/GrimflayerMTG. You can find that link in the description below. So without further ado, let's get into our competitive league. We're on the play with a hand that we would like to keep. Thank you very much. It was a pretty solid keep. Opponent's gonna mull, and they're gonna be fine with 6. So we, of course, will just lead on our swamp here. No green mana is the glaring issue, but with a turn 2 Dark Confidant, not the end of the world. They go Cavern for humans into Ether Vial, very clearly against the human tribal deck, 5-color humans, and very clearly need to just play the Dark Confidant here. We cannot have a double spell turn even if we chose to do something different, but even if we had double swamp there, we should still play the Bob. We're on the play. He's going to be very proactive. So, opponent vials in a Champion of the Parish, and then they're going to get to grow it here with a Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. So that's a really good turn. It's going to wall off our attacks with Bob. It's going to tax our plays. We also get hit for 3 by the Maelstrom Pulse, which is not great. But we found a land, and here was a really interesting spot. So I want double black for Liliana of the Veil. I also want green just to have green. There's also the ability to fetch Fatal Push the Thalia and then Thoughtseize them. So that was actually my plan when I fetched. I was like, alright, if I'm going to Thoughtseize, I don't want to take the extra 2 points of damage to shock. So I'm just going to go mono black lands here. We've got the Bob, we're going to hit green lands. This lets us cast most of the hand that we care about anyway. Worst case scenario, I can fix my mana with Field of Ruin. However, I then changed my mind after I fetched. I looked at it and I was like, maybe I shouldn't be utilizing that Thoughtseize at all. Maybe I should just be mindful of my life total. I can drain them for 2, which advances my clock. I can get rid of the Thalia cleanly, and I can attack with my Confidant, because I don't think they're going to take the trade, and if they did take the trade, that would have been fine with me. But they did not. They're going to keep the champion around, so sure. But they're curving out, and Kitesail Freebooter was a really good one here. Freebooter is always good if you cannot cleanly answer it in a timely fashion. And then they went Mantis Rider after this, so this is actually about as bad as it could get for us. We looked like we were just about even on board, and then all of a sudden, they take away one of our best cards, they present 2 flyers, they grow the champion twice. That's about perfect for them, and we are extremely punished for our decision not to fetch green. because not only can we not cast our Liliana of the Veil because they took it away, which is a big reason we prioritize the swamp, we also draw some other cards for turn that are not great. Tarmogoyf, not great because we can't cast it. Liliana the Last Hope, not great because it is it's not able to kill anything. So what I chose to do here is to get there go our plans to field ourself into green mana. We don't have the luxury to do that anymore, and maybe we never realistically did against humans, to be honest. It was just kind of like, okay, even if we somehow don't find a green land and we really need one, we can get it with field. Now we don't have that luxury. We want to field to get Revolt in Fatal Push, because that's the only way we can take care of Mantis Rider. Now, the reason we did that now is so we could take care of that Horizon Canopy cleanly. That's the reason we did that on our turn. Otherwise, they get to crack the Canopy in response and blank our Field of Ruin, or we have to target another land, and we really want to take care of the Horizon Canopies when we can, because they represent good grindy value. But they've just kind of got everything here, right? The Reflector Mage, bouncing our Bob, getting in for 6, so this looks like a bit of a mess, and to be fair, it is a bit of a mess. So if I had fetched green, who knows? But again, at the time I think it was fairly justifiable. We find green, but doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, we're just dead. So we got absolutely aggroed and tempoed out of that game by the humans, as is their wont. You know, that's really what they do. Things were looking pretty good until they were not. That Thalia, we chose to deal with her with an escalated collective brutality. One wonders how it would have gone if we had, pushed and then thought seized. It depends on what they had in hand at the time to thought seize. Looks like they had a little bit of everything, but, if we had been able to take away maybe the Kite Sail freebooter and then had a Liliana to Edict, who knows? But either way, this looks like a start that would have been kind of tough for us to keep up with, to be honest. So we got wrecked pretty hard game 1, but let's go to the sideboard and see how we change things up against the human deck. Alright, my friends, here to sideboard against 5-color humans, and I like the removal spells and the stuff that can gum up the ground really well, so we're going to start by looking at Pulse, EE, Kitchen Finks. These are all very good cards. Languish is very nice. Liliana the Last Hope lacked the impact that we normally see from her in the window where we found her last game. However, she's still very, very good against the humans. She's going to come in. Collective Brutality is solid enough to play, and Deathmark is incredible, so we're not interested in really anything else here. So we've got 7 cards that, there's not much maybe board stuff here. We pretty much for sure want all 7 of those. So Nihil Spellbomb does nothing here. Thoughtseize can get cut because it's very damaging. A modicum of discard like Inquisition can be good. We don't really want to get too far beyond that. So we've got 3 more cuts to make. In just me personally, opinions vary on this. I like to hedge. I generally, when in doubt, you can mess around, you can tweak this a little bit on the play and the draw, but I like to cut 1 Dark Confidant, 1 Tireless Tracker, and 1 Liliana of the Veil, especially now that we have 4 Lilia of the Veil. Cutting 1 is pretty free. These cards are all fine in the matchup, but we don't really want to see more than 1 of any of them. Possible exception for Lily, if the circumstances are right for her, but exactly one Bob against humans can be pretty good. The second one is almost always bad. He's a little too small to tangle with most of their stuff. The life loss becomes a real liability. Same with Tireless Tracker. 1 can really become a big threat and run away with the game. Multiples are often too clunky. So that's how I like to sideboard against humans, and let's go to game 2. Alright, my friends, here against the humans in game 2, and we have an unkeepable opening 7. It's just 1 land, it's mono green, we have a wicked high curve. Gotta throw it back. We've got a fine 6, however. Double Fatal Push is great, Scooz is good, Lily can be good, and we have yet another Fatal Push, which we did keep on top. So there might be an argument for running out Swamp there so we can push their turn 1 play, but it's just as likely to be Vial as it is a creature, so I ran out the Tomb, and sure enough, Ether Vial was the play. We're just on the Fatal Push train, so pretty clearly want to tap out for Skoos here, be proactive, and, you know, a Skoos backed up by a handful of removal. On the play, seems like it's got potential against humans, so they've got a repeat of their Game 1 play where they go Champion into Thalia. On turn 2, very, very powerful progression there. Starts them off the right way. So we have a Field to Ruin, and we play it to play around the Thalia attacks, and we're going to try to bait them into taking a block or a double block. Any kind of block here is good for us. We get to blow them out. Sensing that, they wisely neglect to block. So before damage, we are going to push. And I actually chose to push the Champion of the Parish because I think, you know, it's often a tough call whether or not to kill the Thalia. Right now, I can play around the Thalia really well because I've got these Fatal Pushes in hand. I've got a Mana Sink on board. If she makes my turns clunky, I can at least get ooze value. The Champion of the Parish is a little scarier in terms of a board presence that can compete with the ooze. So I'm going to choose to push it and eat it before damage. Of course, Thalia is still an issue, stopping us from casting our Lily right now. But, again, I think we can play around her to some degree. So the opponent's got a turn 3 Mantis Rider, not what we want to see, and they get to hit us for 5. And after the fact, they will vial in a Meddling Mage, blind naming Assassin's Trophy. Now, this was a bit of a heart-in-the-throat moment. If they had named Fatal Push, we would have probably just been dead. But I understand them not naming Fatal Push, because they might not necessarily know we play 4. You know, who knows how closely they know these straight Golgari lists. They might be used to Jund playing, you know, 1 or 2. Obviously, they assume we play more, but not necessarily a playset. We've already used 1, so it's statistically less likely to be around. So I understand them naming another card like Trophy. We promptly draw the Trophy, so they still get us. But at least we can still use our pushes, which is much more important. Once again, we're going to try to offer the trade. They don't want it. So we're going to push the Thalia now. She's starting to become an issue. And I chose to leave my Fatal Push up here instead of getting in an extra point of damage, because I'm no longer getting taxed, so it is a realistic play here during combat, on the end step, what have you. So I chose to push the Meddling Mage here, save 2 life, be mana efficient, unlocks my trophy, and the Mantis Rider is something we can trophy or Lily away, potentially next turn. So they've got another Meddling Mage, and this time they blind name the Lily. So that's really interesting because, you know, since we pushed the one naming Trophy, I expected them to name Trophy again. They chose to name something else and they still got us. So these Meddling Mages... Here's another interesting thing, guys. Ether Vial is something that most humans players will side out against us. Meddling Mage, if, like, for some reason they want to keep Vial, like they think the tempo of Vial is worth the dead top decks, the fact that it's not a threat, Meddling Mage should probably be the other card coming out against us. Neither of these cards are great against us. They're both featuring heavily, and they're both actually, you know, pretty effective as it happens, right? But it's all good. We are still riding the Skoos train. Once more, they don't trust themselves to take the trade, rightfully so, because we were holding up Trophy and an activation. Or an activation, excuse me. So we'll just get in for 3, play our land and pass, planning to Trophy away this Mantis Rider, but we'll see what they do. Okay, they're coming across with both. And yep, we kind of have to Trophy the Rider there, even though this Meddling Mage is locking out our Lily. It's just we have more outs to it. We can play defense against it if we need. The Mantis Rider is a better clock, etc., etc. So, opponent in the second main will follow up with a Kambal Council of Allocation. That's a pretty good one against us, and we do draw a non-creature spell right on cue to get taxed by the Kambal. However, she's still good enough that we're going to play her. And we tick up. Doesn't really matter who we target there as far as I can tell. But either way, we're going to take up and try to play protect the life total, protect the Planeswalker. We have to shift into a defensive stance now, especially because the Kambal is giving them a really nice buffer to their own life total. So they crack the Canopy. They play a Freebooter. Okay, that's a good one. But they're only taking away a card that's dead. So on the end step, we eat a creature, and we take our turn. We draw Collective Brutality. That's a pretty good one. So here we could obviously kill either Meddling Mage or Kitesail Freebooter. I think we definitely want to play the Brutality here. Don't get too cute with it. We don't want to lose it to another Freebooter. I chose to kill the Meddling Mage because if I top deck another Liliana of the Veil, I can play it. Whereas if I top deck, if I kill the Freebooter, get my Lily back, she's still locked out, right? And I top deck another one, it's a disaster. So I killed the Meddling Mage, and we're going to tick up on the flyer so that nothing is getting through right now. And we'll pass with a couple Ooze activations up. Opponent's got yet another Meddling Mage. Yeah, we've seen 3. Some decks only play 3 now. And they're going to name Tireless Tracker, which is a pretty good blind name because they're less concerned with non-creature spells now, with Kambal taxing them, right? So, naming Tireless Tracker, yeah, that's pretty good. I don't hate that at all. We gobble up a couple creatures, and we draw Treetop Village. So, once again, we're still in this holding pattern. We tick up on the flyer, and we play D with our Skoos. We're really hoping to fade a Reflector Mage, and it looks like we are, because they would certainly main phase it if they had one. 3 cards in hand, little sketchy. So I'm going to Field of Ruin them here. This should be just a straight-up destruction. They probably don't play more than 2 basics, and that's true. Fixes my own mana just that little bit more. Thins out my deck, because Tireless Tracker is not a good draw anyway, so thinning out the deck's great. Maelstrom Pulse, good draw. And they have a draw step Ether Vial activation, which makes me fear the worst, and indeed it is Freebooter poaching our Pulse. Very well-timed Freebooter on their part. That was rough. That was extremely rough. So, with that done, we're going to once again tick up on the same target. And now, it's starting to get bad. The board's starting to get wide. We're very, very dead to a Reflector Mage. We're going to struggle against a Mantis Rider. Spot removal doesn't necessarily go as far as it could because their board's so wide. They've got tax effects. They've got us locked out. It's looking a little scary. So you know what I did? I just said, well, I've got a 7/7 Ooze. It's time to turn it sideways. I cannot protect my Liliana next turn anyway, in terms of keeping her at alt threshold because they have another flyer down. So we just crash in for 7, and they don't have any really good blocks, so they just take 7. And we're leaning on the Treetop Village now to hold the line for us, to protect our life total or our Planeswalker, as the case may be. They find another land, and they're going to chip in with a Freebooter, stop our Lily from ulting, and that's all they got. So I'll take it. And we top deck the bomb, the absolute bomb of dreams. We were in an interesting position with an interesting decision next turn. It would have been interesting to see what they did as well, right? But we just top deck the Languish, and we just get our stuff back. We just 4-for-1 them. And on top of that, our Skoos is still not only big enough to live, but big enough to attack. Because even if they have a 3/3 to Vial in here, we can still eat something and be fine. They can't trade with it. So we get to go all in. We get to put our Lily of the Last Hope up to threshold of ulting, but should be pretty over from here, and they indeed scoop it up. So, man, that was a really interesting game. They had some interesting Meddling Mage blind names that extended the game in an unusual way. But Scavenging Ooze just kept us in it, clocked them, stabilized us, protected our Planeswalker, as the case may be, and then went back to clocking. Very, very good. All that removal was amazing. Triple Fatal Push, Trophy, Brutality, Languish. these are the draws we want to see. We even had more that we didn't get to play with Pulse and Lily of the Veil. So, awesome stuff. That's exactly the type of stuff we want to see against humans, even though we were a little clunky in spots. Overall, we had all the types of cards we like to see. So we got him game 2, but let's move on to game 3 and see if we can take away the win. Alright, my friends, we are here for game 3 against humans in match 1 of our competitive league, and our opponent has kept 7. We will keep 7 as well. This hand is absolute fire. 3 pieces of really good 1-mana interaction, plus a Lily of the Veil. We even have a manland, so we're not technically without a threat. It's very good. So Noble Hierarch is their start. They've always had the turn 1 Ether Vial up until now. There's a Scavenging Ooze, so that's a good one. We will go ahead and push the Hierarch. We want to slow them down. Definitely the right play on the draw, especially in my opinion. And they don't have a turn 2 play, which makes me very, very happy that that's what we did. So Blooming Marsh was a good draw because it means we're going to get to cast our Liliana on curve if that's what we want to do, for sure. But, and even painlessly. So now we will lead on Inquisition to inform the rest of our turn, and we see a clunky hand. We see a very powerful hand, but very clunky. If we had let that Noble Hierarch live and chosen to Inquisition on turn 1 instead, we would be in for a world of trouble, in my opinion. But instead, we bolted the bird, we pushed the dork, and now they couldn't really do anything good turn 2. Their best play was a Naked Thalia's Lieutenant, and they chose not to do that. So they've got Kambal, they've got Rider, they've got Double Image, they've got Lieutenant. So we don't care about the double images at all. Not at all right now. Especially because we can keep killing their board, decline to play our Ooze, and just strand them in hand, take them away with Lilianas of the Veil. So Thalia's Lieutenant is an option here because it's their only good play right now, but I think we still want to take one of the 3 drops because they're the higher upside cards. They need to hit a land for their hand to be any good anyway, so we might as well play against what's good. And I chose to take the Mantis Rider because, of course, that pressures the Liliana the best, and we're going to make this a Liliana game. They didn't draw a land, they just pass. So we play out our land, and we tick the Lily up. We drew a Fatal Push for turn, which is completely incredible. The only problem we had is that we didn't really want to pitch anything from our hand, but we chose to pitch the land because everything else is just way too good. There goes an image. Alright, they got their 3rd land, they've got to do something, and they play the Kambal, which is fair enough, but we're pretty happy to just, yep, we're going to edict that away. And we are going to play a Scooze, which is fine. It gives them a Phantasmal Image target, but we're more than happy to just be proactive at this point, right? So they rip a Champion of the Parish, they're going to play that. They're going to try to get a little something going with a double spell turn, which is the type of thing they need to do. They can't just keep playing things one at a time into our Liliana. So that's all fine, but unfortunately for them, we have a hand full of Fatal Pushes. And we rip a land for turn, which doesn't do much, except this. It allows us to totally empty our hand, push the Lieutenant, we're ticking the Liliana up, we're crashing in with a big Ooze in a treetop village, and we're going to have a Liliana on 3. The opponent just scoops it up. So that was absolutely fantastic. We saw 3 Fatal Pushes in both games 2 and 3, which is pretty much our best card against humans, certainly one of them. And yeah, where this match was won here was pushing the Hierarch turn 1. In my scouting report on humans, that's something that I wrote you should do. When you're in doubt, push the turn 1 Mana Dork. And it's for exactly reasons like this. If humans has to play things out one at a time, when they're not accelerating their mana through Ether Vial or Noble Hierarch, we are able to leverage the raw power of our cards to an insane degree. We were so far ahead here, it is ridiculous. And the opponent, again, seeing the writing on the wall, just goes ahead and scoops. So that was an awesome way to start the league. We had our clunky mana issues game 1. I think probably no matter what we did with that fetch, we would have been in trouble with their progression relative to ours. But we came back strong post-side, and we got humans, so we start out 1-0. Thanks for watching. I'll see you for round 2. Alright, my friends, here for round 2 of Competitive League with Golgari Midrange, and our opponent has kept 7. We are on the draw. We'll keep 7 as well. It's a hand we don't throw back in game 1, but it does lack a threat, of course. So, opponent will lead us off with a tapped Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, and here's where we sigh, because this is Valakut. This is some kind of Valakut deck. This is our worst top-tier matchup in Modern. There might be 1 or 2 matchups that are worse than Valakut. Living End comes to mind, but Living End is not really a tiered deck anymore. Titan Shift and other Valakut variants are. So, very, very unhappy to see this. It's not a matchup we're supposed to win, but we're going to give it our best shot. And we see a hand with a ton of 2-mana cards, very unusual for them. Only 2 lands, but just enough to really get going. Tough call here. I don't think we want to take the Prismatic Omen. So it was between Colony Heart Expedition and Sakura Tribe Elder. I think you could choose either one. I chose to take away an Elder there simply because we want to deny them land drops, whether or not they have Expedition as a payoff. This does not actually get you lands until you've already gotten lands, if that makes sense. And since they're on a 2-lander, I think that was correct, but I could see an argument for the other way as well. And they'll go ahead and play the Colony Heart instead of the Sakura Tribe Elder, so they do value that highly. And we will go to turn, and we rip a Thoughtseize. That was a very good draw. Very, very good draw. We see that they have a mountain in hand, which is unfortunate. We want to deny them lands, but we're going to go ahead and take away the Sakura Tribe Elder and take away the Prismatic Omen, because next turn we get the Lily online. They're going to have to discard that Titan almost certainly, right? So they play their mountain, they get the counter on Colony Heart, and that's all they got. And we're not drawing threats, we're not doing much, but besides just ripping their hand to shreds, which is pretty good, to be fair. It is pretty good, but a threat along the way here would be great. We're going to pitch our Painful Land, and they're going to pitch their Primetime. So yeah, that's why we left that in hand. We knew they weren't going to get there before we started disrupting them heavily with Lily. But they're finding lands off the top, so we are a bit punished. We technically found a threat there. Not a very good one, but a threat nevertheless. And they discard a Lightning Bolt. And they get us to hardcast a Search for Tomorrow. There's their Colony Heart. And they're able to crack it at will now. We find Kalidas Trader of Get. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just slam him. Tick up. They get to crack the Colony Heart. Go get a pair of mountains and take care of our Liliana cleanly. Feels bad, obviously, the Liliana ultimate there is amazing against Scapeshift. That was our best hope, but we're gonna go ahead and find another Lily right off the top, so that's actually pretty good, all things considered. We'll tick up. They've got a card they sandbagged, and it is a Lightning Bolt. So they're bolting us. They're gonna try to kill us with land drops. And or keep us below 18, because our Kalidas is lifelinking. So they want to keep us in the range of Escape Shift. They've got yet another card they're going to sandbag. We find yet another land. It was an Anger of the Gods, so we tick up, get the Anger out of their hand. And I chose to field the Valakut here, so they don't get that Valakut value just off of land drops for now. And we get to crack in with the Kalidas. You'll note that we are just shy of activating the Hissing Quagmire here. It's unfortunate. Search for Tomorrow is their draw for turn. And once again, we're just shy of being able to activate the Quagmire, but I do think playing the Bob there is correct. And once more, we've got Lily at the ultimate threshold. We're up above 18 with Kalidas. We're clocking them. They don't quite face lethal, but they're facing the ult, and they scoop it up. they scoop it up. So getting game 1 against Titan Shift is a minor miracle, especially without much in the way of a clock. We didn't kill them till turn 9. But the power of triple discard in the first 2 turns, followed by a Liliana of the Veil, followed after that by another Liliana of the Veil with a Kalitas in between. Yeah, that was enough. That was enough, so feels amazing. Feels amazing to take a game against Titan Shift, especially if it's game 1, but still just about our hardest tiered matchup, right? So let's go to game 2. Let's go to the sideboard first and see how we gear up for game 2. Alright, my friends, how to sideboard against Titan Shift. So this is a matchup that is hard for us, and with the hard matchups, it's often more interesting to see what comes out before what comes in. Just because if a matchup is hard, you know we have a lot of pretty dead cards against it. So Abrupt Decay is not technically dead. They've got Colony Heart, they've got Prismatic Omen, but it's bad enough that it should come out alongside the Nile Spellbombs. We probably want to cut all Fatal Pushes too, even though they might have some push targets post-side, some value creatures that we could potentially hit. These, you know, technically most of these cards have some use, but these 7, you know, Last Hope plus the Graveyard Hate and the low-end spot removal that only hits small stuff, those are pretty much our worst cards, right? So what do we like? Well, Fulminator Mage is our best card. Land Destruction is amazing. Surgical Extraction pairs nicely with Fulminator and with Field of Ruin, and also with discard, so you can take them off of Valakuts, you can take them even sometimes off of like a land that's a 4 of, like I don't know, I'd have to see the list, but maybe a Stomping Ground or something. Just taking the amount of mountains out of their deck can be good, especially if you strip a card out of their hand that way. And, of course, taking away Titan Shift or Escape Shift with Extraction is very valid as well. So those 4 cards for sure. Collective Brutality is good enough. A little bit, it adds a little bit to the clock sometimes, can take Escape Shift or a ramp spell out of their hand. Kitchen Finks is just another, you know, medium clock that helps keep our life total high, potentially higher than lethal for Escape Shift sometimes. Maelstrom Pulse is a decent catch-all as well here, right? Because it does hit all of the things that I mentioned are good targets for Abrupt Decay, or decent targets for Abrupt Decay, plus it kills Titan. Much more importantly, it kills Titan. It kills some other big stuff out of the side that, you know, could be just about anything. Deathmark is kind of the odd man out, because Deathmark is playable here, but I think it is the weakest. I think it is the weakest of these 7. Of these 8, excuse me. And if we go 7 in, 7 out, we don't have space for Deathmark. So whether you want to squeeze in the Deathmark, that's maybe up to you. I suppose you could cut a slow threat like Tireless Tracker maybe, but I didn't. I don't think it's necessarily correct to be that reactive. I'd rather just play my tracker and try to win the game, try to end the game. So anyway, that is how I sided for this Titan Shift match, and we'll see you for game 2. Alright, my friends, here for game 2 against Titan Shift. Our opponent has kept 7, and we will as well. You know, turn 1 Inquisition should be pretty good. Turn 2 Tarmogoyf into turn 3 Lily. This is the Curve of Dreams. This is the Curve of Dreams, but they start off with a Relic, making our curve a little bit less appealing. And so we'll still go ahead and lead on the Inquisition, and now our curve gets even worse, because when our Inquisition whiffs, that is so bad. Like, sometimes against a lot of decks, you're like, well, if my Inquisition whiffs, they're not doing anything for the early turns, so we're totally fine, right? Not the case against Titan Shift, because they have such amazing late-game inevitability, and to make matters worse, we just drew another Inquisition for turn. So not only did we whiff, we have another card in hand that's probably dead, and our turn 2 Tarmogoyf is a lot less appealing against this Relic, and our turn 3 Lily, well, we still don't quite have the mana for her. So they're going to be vigilant about our graveyards. They clear us out with the Relic, and they just play a land and pass. So we draw Hissing Quagmire. Alright, well, that's at least a land. Lets us cast our Lily on curve for sure. So I, of course, play that, but that's the right play. Now, this Inquisition, I'm like, you know, it is not going to be good any other time than right now. It's still pretty likely to whiff right now. You know, the odds that they drew something that Inquisition can hit that they didn't play this turn are pretty low. But next turn we're slamming the Lily, and from there we're probably never going to play the Inquisition. We're going to play creatures. So, I think playing Inquisition here was correct, even though it was likely to whiff, and it sure did whiff for us. The only reason to keep it would have been because it's kind of a free pitch to Liliana, which, to be fair, is a consideration. So end step, they relic us, they fetch, and you know we're kind of feeling bad because our stuff is whiffed, and right after we Inquisition them twice, they rip a really good card that we could have hit with Inquisition. So that's a little rough, but such is life. I think they played out a Stomping Ground there. We're drawing a land. You know, that's fine. It makes Tracker a decent play next turn. And, yeah, but it's definitely Liliana time. So here we've got to pitch a creature. I think we're supposed to keep that land, and it's going to be the Skoos. There was an argument for Tarmogoyf there, but I think what we want to do is try to pressurize them into cracking the Relic, and then Tarmogoyf becomes a really good threat from there. Skoos, not so much. It's just going to die to bolts. You know, it's an anemic clock. We want the higher payoff card when we're in a situation like this, which is Tarmogoyf. So they're still relicking us. They'll play a Valakut from hand, and they got a Farseek. Yeah, so now they're ripping all the Inquisition targets after we've already whiffed with our Inquisitions. Feels bad. They're developing their mana, more importantly. We were hoping that they just would kind of draw more lands, and they would be too slow to really leverage their stuff. But they're not. So we tick up the Lily. They're going to crack the Relic in response, so our choice to hold on to the Tarmogoyf is paying off here. Here I made a really a minor misplay, but a misplay nevertheless. I chose to pitch my Blooming Marsh because I'm going to go Tracker into fetch land, right? That's the best play? Well, it's actually not, because I didn't think of this until right after I did it, but cracking that fetch, it gets us 2 clues, but it puts us down to 18, and we are just dead to Escape Shift, and sure, they have it. Now, so that was a misplay. I should have played the Blooming Marsh. We'd be at 19. We wouldn't just be dead here. That said, they've got the prime time. They've got, they had the prime time for next turn, that is. We're not gonna win that game anyway. We just aren't. So, while I should not have fetched, we are pretty far behind. The Titan would have been a big problem. We probably would have lost the game in 2 turns regardless. But anyway, they get to Escape Shift us for exactly lethal because I fetched. So that is a misplay, but one that did not change the fate of this game at all. So this is kind of the opposite, how Titan Shift games can look, right? Game 1, we shredded their hand. We had an okay clock, not a great one, but enough. And the Lilianas, they had to spend all their triggers on Lilianas, and they still got run out of the game by another Liliana. Here's kind of the opposite. Our interaction whiffed. They just had a hand with 2 top-end cards and a bunch of lands. And that's how they kill us. That's really how they kill us. That's why this matchup is so bad. And you saw it here. But anyway, that happens. Let's go to Game 3 and see if we can get him while we're on the play. Alright, my friends, Game 3 against our nemesis, our worst tiered matchup in Modern, which is Titan Shift, and we have an unplayable hand. A Skoos plus 6 lands is not going to get it done, so we have to throw this back. Our opponent's keeping 7, very, very rough for us. This hand is not that great either, and especially we don't want that Verdant Catacombs, but Tarmogoyf is our best threat if we can fill up the graveyards, and if it doesn't die right away to a removal spell. You know, that might be okay, and we draw a Bob. So the Bob was a really interesting draw. Obviously, you could go either way, but I chose to play the Bob because it's actually a better clock than Tarmogoyf, arguably has better upside if it lives. So Bob was a fine draw, but very bad for us. They have the Bolt. That's really what we wanted to fade. Was a removal spell on our turn 2 threat, and they went ahead and suspended a Search for Tomorrow. We draw Surgical Extraction, you know, decent card in the matchup, but not accomplishing much here. So, Goyf, into a shock land painlessly, and we just have to pass. We don't have the hand disruption we want. We don't have the planeswalkers we want. The planeswalker we want, Liliana of the Veil. So we're kind of hoping they're going to stumble. But so far they're making their land drops. They're ramping with Farseek and Search for Tomorrow. So now we're kind of reduced to hoping they don't have the payoffs. Field of Ruin, okay? Decent draw, potentially, but here it doesn't accomplish much. We're not gonna, like, without any hand knowledge, it's not a good idea to, like, field a Stomping Ground, blindly extract it. Like, that can be an okay play in certain windows, but you don't want to do that blindly, in my opinion. So instead we're going to fire up the Treetop Village, which is actually very good here. Getting across for 6, we've got to clock them. That's the name of the game. Especially when the rest of our hand doesn't do much. They get to resolve the Search for Tomorrow. They've got a bunch of lands. They're at 6 mana. And they're fetching, they're tapping out. You know what it means. Yep, Primeval Titan. So, pretty rough. We were hoping they didn't have the payoffs, and they have the turn 4 Titan. Pretty rough stuff. They go get double Valakut. No triggers yet, but they're all set up for more triggers from here on out. So we do have an answer to Titan, and we draw another land for turn. Field of Ruin. It's Field of Ruin time. So here's why we field here. So we're going to go ahead and take away one of the Valakuts, which is going to mean that their top-decked lands are a lot less painful from here on out. So Valakut controls at least 5 other mountains. That criteria is met, so any land they top-deck is going to be good for them. It's going to represent 3 damage from that Valakut. Would have been 6 damage from 2 Valakut, so we needed to take care of that before they make any more land drops. Otherwise, they just kill our Tarmogoyf with the first one, and then they kill us with the rest of them, right? So we get to field the Valakut away, pulse the Titan away. Honestly, this is pretty good for us, considering how well they've curved out. It's been like a good Titan shift curve. We haven't had much disruption, and we're still in the game. We're still at 20 life, too. So, Tarmogoyf crashing in for 4, passing. And here's the other reason we did it the way we did it. So we set a stop on their draw step, and we can surgical extraction either the Valakut or the Titan. Now, I chose the Titan here, and I think that was the correct play, because there is 1 fewer Valakut in the deck already, because we've destroyed one. Titan is also a better top deck for them, blah, blah, blah. I think Titan is the correct surgical target, and let's hope this doesn't mess our client up too much. Okay, so we see that they do have a Titan in hand, so we are extremely rewarded for our decision. We see how they sided and what spicy cards are in their deck. So we see they have a 1 of Wood Elves, which is not always there. We see they have a couple Summoners packs, including 1 in hand, another 1 in the deck. We see that they have triple Obstinate Baloth, which is very good against us, triple Relic. What else? A Tireless Tracker. So they've got a lot of stuff for the BGX that's good in the BGX matchup. But right now in hand, they have packed a Titan. So we get to extract all Titans and strip 1 out of their hand. So it's a very, very good play for us. However, that Summoner's Pact means that they are still in the game, because if they didn't have that, they'd just be dead on board with 4 or 5 Goyf plus a Treetop Village. So they get to pact for a tracker. They get to make the land drop. They get to crack a clue. It's all pretty good. It's pretty good value. We're hoping for a great draw here for turn. Inquisition of Kozilek, not a good draw. If we had had removal, we might have just won the game. Instead, we're going to fire up our Inquisition. It's going to whiff. There could have been a target there, like a Lightning Bolt. That was basically the main reason to Inquisition, is if they had Bolt, to save our Treetop Village from it. But they just have lands, so we force them to trade away the tracker here. They can either chump the Goyf or trade it for the village. And of course, trading it for the village is correct, so that's what they do. They go to 3. They've got to pay for the pact. So they've got to top deck something here, basically. And, well, I guess they don't have to top deck something here because we knew they had lands, and these Valakut triggers are just going to take care of our Goyf, so that's pretty rough. And on top of that, they top decked a creature. Very, very bad for us. Obstinate Baloth. Stabilizes their life total. Is a clock. We draw Skoos. I mean, it's a fine draw, and we've got to just play it, but it's just like their land drops just kill our stuff now because they've got 2 Valakuts again. They've got land, at least another land in hand. Pretty rough. This is why, again, this is why Titan Shift is so rough for us, right? It's like it almost doesn't matter what you do past a certain point of the game. The inevitability is so strong because they don't have blanks when they're in a situation like this. Their land drops are land draws are good. Their non-land draws are good. So they kill our Skoos. They hit us for 4. We have a trophy. So they come across with the Baloth. I trophied away the Baloth. To be fair here, I probably should have trophied away a Valakut. Probably should have trophied away a Valakut because, I mean, these things just do so much damage to us, right? But I'm kind of thinking, you know, okay, we need to end the game quicker, so we need to take away their blocker, but either way, it's all bad for us, right? It's all bad. So, I don't think it mattered what we did there because our draw for turn was Tireless Tracker, which isn't accomplishing much. They get to fetch, they get to ping us twice with the Valakut, and they had Hour of Devastation, plus another land drop, so we are just dead. Didn't really matter what we did there. Our creatures getting swept were dead to the inevitability of the deck. So, ooh, tough one. Tough one, guys. We don't want to run into Titan Shift to begin with. Like I've said a couple times now, it is our worst tiered matchup in Modern. And beyond that, you know, we gave them a really good fight. We took them game 1, and we had them just down to 3 here. Game 2, if their hand had been a little bit worse, or their progression had been a little bit worse here in Game 3, we would have got them, and that's all without seeing, you know, Fulminator Mage, any of our particularly backbreaking cards. We had a decent progression, but not one to write home about, and we still almost got there, so feels tough. We're knocked out of the running for 5-0, and we fall to 1-1, but it was still a really good game considering the matchup, so it happens. This is a boogeyman deck for us. What can you do? It's a lot better than it used to be, I'll say that, with Assassin's Trophy that has made this matchup better, just like all the other big mana matchups, but it's still a tough one, and they got us. So, good game, and let's move on to round 3. Alright, my friends. This is round 3 of our Replay Competitive League, and we are on the play with a keepable hand. It's potentially a little bit clunky with mana issues here, but it's got a lot of raw power. We can do a lot off of just one swamp, and our opponent's going to be mulliganing as well, so there are some things in our favor here. Our opponent mulls to 6. You know, there might be an argument for playing Treetop Village, but with 3 1-mana black spells, I don't think so. I think we are supposed to make a play here turn 1, which is of course going to be Thoughtseize. And we see that we are against Eldrazi-tron. They have Urza's Mine in Wastes. They have scryed to the bottom. So we know that they are almost certainly in search of lands. I think they would have topped a land and bottomed just about anything else. Maybe they top another expedition map too. Maybe they top a Mind Stone, who knows. But basically I think they're going to bottom threats and answers, and they're going to top land and ramp. So because we saw them scry to the bottom, I took away the expedition map here, but you could have argued for a couple different things. Chalice of the Void, normally not good against us, but, you know, it's their only real play. I guess that's not true. Map is a real play if we don't take the map. So, but you think more about Chalice than you otherwise would, because we do have a couple 1-mana spells in hand. Obviously, you think about taking away powerful cards like Thought-Knot Seer and Karn Liberated, right? But I chose to take away the map, and we'll see how it plays out for us. Opponent's going to play their Mine and pass. We draw Forest, okay. I mean, it's not the land we want to see because we wanted to be able to cast a turn 3 Liliana. Right now we cannot. Opponent plays an Eldrazi Temple, so they're finding lands, and they play the Chalice on one, so that combination of things is pretty bad for us. Right on cue, we draw an Inquisition. Not good. Not good against Chalice on one. So we're going to play our Tireless Tracker, you know. We've got to use our mana efficiently that turn. I think that's better than firing up Treetop, even though they do probably play some Dismembers. But looks like they're just going to make their land drops. They still have a Wastes in hand, so they're making all their land drops. So we're a bit punished for taking away the map. And they get to Thought Knot us. And obviously they're going to take the Lily here because everything else is locked out by Chalice. So pretty rough for us, my friends, the way the draws have lined up. And we draw yet another 1-mana spell. Ooh, scary. So here, of course, we just stay back. They can't really attack into us because we're representing the double block, which would still be kind of bad for us, but it's one we would try to take. They find an Urza's Land, so very scary. They're getting to the point of Tron, and they're also getting to the point just making land drops and maybe hardcasting a Karn, while we are locked out completely by the Chalice. Alright, we draw yet another forest. We're severely lacking in black lands, but we will take it. We'll make the land drop, we'll crack our clue, we'll buff up our tracker, and we're gonna find, hopefully, something good. Assassin's Trophy. That's something good. So we'll pass. We're content to play reactively here. And they rip a Tron piece right off the top. So it's Karn Liberated time. Very bad for us. They're going to exile our tracker. And respecting the Treetop Village, they're keeping the Thought Knot Seer back. So this is what we do. We're going to trophy away the Thought Knot Seer. This is going to get us a draw. And we're going to try to remove the Karn with a Treetop Village attack. So this is the kind of the high risk, high reward line, but we have to take it against a Karn. Like, we've been too clunky, we're too far behind due to the Chalice and due to other things. We've got to take the high risk, high reward line. And let's see, first of all, if our Village can get the job done. Village fired up, attacking Karn. Very good. That was awesome. So step one is taking care of the Karn, and then Tarmogoyf was a good draw too. So we'll follow up with a 6/7 Tarmogoyf. They've got their wastes down, so we don't know anything about their hand. Matter Reshaper is a good card against us, but not a particularly scary payoff for all that mana. Alright, so Scavenging Ooze is a fine draw. We will first attack with the Tarmogoyf, though. They're going to take the block. They do. And Matter Reshaper reveals Dismember, which is actually quite good for them, because, like, taking a block and dismembering on the same turn is one of their only clean ways to take care of a Tarmogoyf. And that's exactly what they get to do, so stuff is still lining up okay for them, but at least we have another follow-up play. Scavenging Ooze could be decent, and, you know, they're flooding, which is good for us, but that was a Ghost Quarter, so Treetop Village is no longer a threat that we can rely on. End step, we're going to start growing our Ooze. They're going to GQ our Village, we'll respond by floating mana. We'll go get the only basic type we can, which is a Swamp, and we'll eat a couple of Eldrazi out of the yard. Verdant Catacombs, not a very good draw, so we're still totally locked out by the Chalice. We're going to sandbag that land and just crash in for 4. They draw another Ghost Quarter. Okay. No payoffs. No payoffs, so we get to go eat our own Tarmogoyf. They're going to GQ us. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to take us off of green. Makes sense. We don't get at least Stone Rained by that, but we do get to, we are losing out on our green sources. We draw yet another land, but this land is actually a fine draw. Hissing Quagmire, as I have said before, lines up very well against Eldrazi decks. It's one of the few matchups where it's actually a better manland overall than Treetop Village. They find a Thought Knot Seer. Sure, you got it, my friend. Take away one of our useless spells. They take the correct one, which is one of our Fatal Pushes, and they play yet another land, so they're empty-handed. They've flooded pretty hard, and their Thought Knot is just a 4/4. That is going to give us a card when it dies, if it dies. So, things are going okay for us, considering. We draw yet another land, though we can't really punish them, right? So here it's time to fire up Hissing Quagmire, because they actually are forced to take a block here. We have lethal, exactly lethal on board. So they're going to take the better block, lets them trade with the Quagmire, which is the correct play, but this is also fine for us. We put them to 2, we draw a card, and here's why we didn't play our land yet, because we draw yet another Hissing Quagmire, which represents 2 creatures now, both of which are lethal on board, and they have a big draw step, but they don't find what they need to stay alive, so we, on turn 10, grind through an Eldrazi deck that seemed like they had answers for everything, that had a Chalice of the Void on 1, which usually isn't very good against us, locking out 4 of our spells forever, and we flooded kinda hard. We still got there. We still got there because our man lands are OP. Treetop Village allowing us to have a really good turn of trophying Thought-Knot to get a draw, Treetop taking care of Karn when we untap, and then we found the land and the Tarmogoyf to go swamp Tarmogoyf afterward. That was a very, very important turn, not only for staying in the game, but for taking the aggro roll, right? We took the aggro roll when that happened, and they found some more draws, they found some Ghost Quarters to answer a Treetop, they found a Thought-Knot, but they flooded out, they found a a Matter Reshaper into a Dismember, which was really nice for them, honestly, but they didn't find any top-end payoff cards, and our Skoos ended up outclassing what they could put together, with some help from some more Hissing Quagmires. So that was a really cool game. I'm very glad to come out top against Eldrazi in Game 1. I think we are unfavored here, but I think we can tangle with them, and it's going to get better post-side, so let's go check that out and see what we do. Alright, my friends, here we are deciding how to sideboard against Eldrazi. What did we do here in this matchup? So, what we want to do here, in my opinion, is take away some of the lower end stuff that doesn't necessarily hit everything. So when we're talking about cards like that, we're talking about Inquisition of Kozilek, Fatal Push, and Abrupt Decay mainly, right? And Collective Brutality. These are all cards that miss out on a lot of the bigger stuff, but we don't want to just blindly side out all of it. So I like siding out Collective Brutality because the discard mode isn't great, the life drain isn't that relevant, and the -2/-2 is very weak against them. You can do a little bit of work with a couple of those modes, but it doesn't get us very far. So Collective Brutality is out. And then Inquisition, in my opinion, is also out because we want to treat this kind of like a mid-rangey matchup. But Thoughtseize is incredible. So we want to top deck threats and answers more than discard, but Thoughtseize is awesome. So Inquisition comes out. Inquisition is fine in the opener, but it rapidly loses utility, and we can run into situations where they just have a top end, like we saw against Titan Shift, and Inquisition can blank. So I would rather cut those parts of the lower end and leave in parts of the lower end like Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay. Abrupt Decay is nice against Chalice of the Void. It can hit those 3-drop cards. Fatal Push, of course, takes care of Thought-Knot Seer, which is the main reason we want to leave that in. It needs Revolt to do so, but it still takes care of Thought-Knot Seer. So we take away some, but not all, of kind of the lower end of interaction. Nile Spellbound doesn't really do much, and Liliana the Last Hope is not the worst, but she's a card we can look to cut. And then if we need more slots, we might be able to trim away at some of the other cards I just mentioned. But for how my particular sideboard looks, it's a pretty clean 6 for 6. Maelstrom Pulse is an incredible card. Guys, look how often we bring this card in. There's a reason I play 2 of them. And there's a reason I keep one in the main deck, even though there's a million other cards competing for its slot. Maelstrom Pulse, all-star of the deck in my opinion. Fulminator Mage, these 3 come in for sure. Clogging up the ground is good against them, and also the Stone Rain mode on site is relevant against a Tron deck, of course. Surgical Extraction, again, pairs well with Fulminator Mage. I'm a little less high on this card than I am in some other matchups where it comes in. This is more borderline for me, but I think it still merits a spot. And I mentioned clogging up the ground. Kitchen Finks is pretty good here, right? So as you can see, we're not that interested in that much else. None of this other stuff really does all that much. You could consider Nissa Vital Force. I think she's respectable enough to consider, but I don't believe I brought her in for this. I just think we did a clean 6 for 6 and called it good there. So yeah, let's move on to game 2. See how we do against the Eldrazi deck. Alright, my friends, we're here. Game 2 against Eldrazi. They have kept 7, as will we. Our hand is mono threats, no interaction, which is very not great, especially on the draw. But I don't think we're going to throw this one back, because it's just as likely that they're on kind of a slowish, mid-rangey style curve as they are, like, turn 3 Tron that we need to disrupt or we're going to lose. Remember, this is not traditional Tron. We don't want to sacrifice value desperately digging for a small number of cards. Now, granted, this is still kind of a borderline hand because it is just maybe even too slow to compete with their mid-rangey style curves, but I kept it. I think it's a justifiable keep, but they've got 2 Tron lands into a Chalice right away. Here we don't care about the Chalice at all. I'm not surprised they left it in because it totally hosed us game 1, but I'm still happy to see that they left it in. I don't think it's good against us. We drew another land, or excuse me, we drew another Bob, which could be good. We'll play a Bob and see how it goes. Thankfully, they don't have Tron, but, 2 Tron lands and an Eldrazi Temple is probably the runner-up, right? Like, that's still a really good few land drops to have made. But they go Reality Smasher and pass. So Dark Confidant's going to reveal Field of Ruin. Field of Ruin's a good one. However, I think pretty clearly we do need to keep them off Tron and or just set them back a land here. So we're going to play the Fulminator, immediately Stone Rain them, and pass. We hit the tower because it's the one they showed us second, so they're more likely to have a power plant in hand. And, tower is also just a more powerful land, right? So they have a Ghost Quarter, and they're going to pass. They don't want to pressurize us, which is interesting. I expected the attack, but I guess they just really want to make sure they're trading with this Reshaper one way or another. We draw another Field of Ruin. And, there are a couple options here. Tireless Tracker into land would have been somewhat tempting, but with all these lands in hand and with it looking like a longer-term value game, and with our Bob just unchecked drawing us second card every turn, I don't think the onus was on us to go Tracker into land. Also, just tapping out for Kalitas never feels bad, especially with a Reshaper across the field. Kalitas' replacement effect will hose the death trigger of Reshaper, so very good against them. All that said, I chose to just go Field of Ruin here, take them off of Eldrazi Temple. We're attacking their mana base very well, and we get to play a Tarmogoyf after that, who granted is only a 2/3, but is still a very, very good play that could get out of control really quickly. So they're continuing to make land drops, but they're not cheating on mana anymore. So another Matter Reshaper, and we're just still stalled out. Bob is going to flip another Tarmogoyf in a Treetop Village, so we're so far ahead that we are just going to slam Kalitas into Treetop Village and pass. We're very far ahead on cards, we're far ahead on board, and if we get to survive and untap with this Kalitas, oh boy, is that going to be good. So they play a Seagate Wreckage and they just pass. So, Dark Confidant reveals yet another Tarmogoyf. I mean, even if our big blowout doesn't happen, they're going to struggle to maybe chew through all of these Tarmogoyfs unless they find a relic. But the first thing we're going to do is try to Maelstrom Pulse away those Matter Reshapers. And they would have had to have like a Dismember in response for our Kalitas. They didn't have it. What a blowout. We get to 4-for-1 them. And those creatures didn't do anything for them. On top of that, they were just 3/2 sitting there staring at our Bob and our Goyf. So, gigantic blowout. I play yet another Field of Ruin. We've got absolutely everything going on this game. I'm not afraid of the Dismember at all, because they would have cast it if they had it there, so I chose to activate the Kalitas here, get the Kalitas huge, protect against other Dismembers, increases our clock, gains us even more life, the opponent takes their draw step, and they just scoop it up. So that was, I mean, granted, it wasn't the quickest kill you've ever seen, it was a turn 7 scoop. They would have died on turn... Yeah, we're on the draw, so on our turn 7. But, wow, absolutely backbreaking. Dark Confidant, running away with the game in terms of card advantage, but our interaction. Fulminator into Field of Ruin, into Maelstrom Pulse getting us a 4-for-1 after the Kalitas. Like, how good was this? This was such a feel-good game. Polar opposite of Game 1. Now, granted, we still won Game 1, but Game 1 was feel-bad. We were locked out under Chalice. They ripped Tron off the top. They carned us. It was all a little bit desperate, but we got there. But here in Game 2, just an utterly dominating display. So that felt good. Our sideboard changes looked really good here, and we got them. We curved out really well. So good game, well played, and we move on to 2-1. I hope you guys are enjoying this, and I hope you'll stay with me for round 4. Alright, my friends, here we are for round 4 of this competitive league with Golgari on the play, with a very awkward hand, but I did decide to keep it. I don't like mulling in blind game 1s. We already have the wrong half of the deck issue. We don't want to compound that by mulling to a potentially unplayable 6. So we go Forest and Denial Spellbomb with no black land. Very, very awkward, but at least we have a play. We've used our mana turn 1, even though it doesn't do anything good until till we find a black land, and we do have a turn 2 play of Ooze. So we've got a lot of leeway in terms of what we're doing if we just totally blank on lands, right? So Blood-Soaked Champion. This is a 2-1 that can't block. If you attacked with a creature this turn, you can return it to the battlefield for 2 mana from the graveyard. So definitely don't know what that is, but we draw Abrupt Decay, which is very bad with our mana situation, but again, it's not desperate yet because we get to just play our Skoos, and these are perfectly normal plays within the confines of our hand, regardless of the mana. But we do definitely need to see some black mana soon. So definitely not trading there. My Ooze seems like it's going to be valuable here. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. So now, I mean, Swamp, Plains, Blood-Soaked Champion, Thalia. I genuinely don't know here what I'm up against, but I do draw a beautiful Verdant Catacombs. Go get ourselves a Swamp. And we're just going to go ahead and Fatal Push the Thalia. Eater. Get in for 3. Seems pretty good to me. Seems pretty good to me. And they got another Blood-Soaked Champion, sure. Still only on 2 lands, it appears. They're gonna be racing us for now. Okay, they do have the 3rd land. It's an Arid Mesa. They'll pass. Alright, another Scavenging Ooze, not the best draw. We definitely want... we definitely want something that does something different, even though this Ooze is good. With how awkward our mana is, we need, like, more green and more black mana, basically. So, that said, we do get to try to line up a 2-for-1 here with our Maelstrom Pulse, and it's gonna work, and we should be safe enough to untap with our Skoos and stop them from coming back with their raid, unless they have a haste threat. Now, even if they do, we can just crack the Spellbomb for no value. It's not ideal, but we'll keep those things from coming back one way or the other. They go to get a Godless Shrine. They play a Clifftop Retreat, okay? So this is a Mardu deck, and they play a new one. Ravnica Allegiance, new entry to the format, Judith the Scourge Diva. She's a 2-2 that has a +1/+0 Anthem effect. Whenever any non-token creature you control dies, she deals 1 damage to any target. So this looks like an Aristocrats deck. Now I kind of see what's going on, but I still don't exactly know, right? But looks like some kind of an Aristocrats deck. Forest is an okay draw here. we're just gonna go ahead and kill Judith before they get any kind of crazy value out of her. And we're just putting the pressure on with Use. We'll eat a Blood-Soaked Champion. It looks like their highest payoff card to have in the graveyard for now. This gets us up out of Bolt range in case they're playing Lightning Bolt. Obviously, it advances our clock as well, so it's all very looking very decent for us at the moment. They make yet another land drop. They might be a bit flooded. Fatal Push is an okay draw. Again, mana issues make that a little bit worse, but alright, so we're attacking. There's no blocks before damage. I'm going to eat the other champion, which makes me officially have a turn 2 clock. I thought about eating Judith as well, but I decided to just pass holding everything up. Here we can Field of Ruin to fix our mana. We can push or Spellbomb. You know, we're bluffing other things too. We're holding up an Ooze activation, so opponent will take their draw step and just scoop. Seems like they just flooded out, so I don't really know exactly what I'm up against, but it looks like some kind of an Aristocrats deck. So with that limited information, knowing only about Mardu colors, Judith, the Scourge Diva, Blood-Soaked Champion, and Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, we're going to go to the sideboard and take a look at what I did here. Alright, my friends, we're sideboarding against some kind of a Mardu Aristocrats deck here, and let's find out what we're going to do. So let's give ourselves a little bit more room to work with here. Try to remember exactly what I did. So they are a deck that plays a lot of small creatures that seem to get value out of when they die, whether it be because they can ping us like Judith does, or whether they can come back like Blood-Soaked Champion. So I think that we want removal for sure. We want to treat it like a small creature matchup, but we also want to be doing other things. So I think I like Kitchen Finks to gum up the ground and to get my own value when creatures trade and when things die. Maelstrom Pulse, because we still do want the removal. Collective Brutality, I think was a yes. Again, its modes are irrelevant. I brought in... Where'd those cards go? There they are. Okay. We brought in the Languish. We brought in the Liliana, the Last Hope. These, you know, they do seem like a deck that grinds to some degree. She's going to be able to take up and kill Thalia cleanly, and a lot of other stuff that might get a little value or might come back, but still seems very good to me. The stuff that was a little bit more maybe board, as I recall, was Deathmark, which we saw Thalia's. We didn't see anything else for white creatures. There shouldn't be green. And Nile Spellbomb, I just didn't quite know how much they rely on the graveyard. We also considered Grafdigger's Cage, because we know the Blood-Soaked Champions can come back. We don't know what else they've got. Engineered Explosives, I think... I don't remember if I brought this in. I'd classify it as a maybe board card right now. So we've got a lot to think about. So what don't we like? Well, I think this is a creature matchup. Liliana the Veil's still good in some windows, but I think we sided out too, because they've got recursion, they've got value. She might be a little bit clunky. But I still think, you know, they're curving traditionally enough that we still want access to Lilies of the Veil. I definitely just cut Thoughtseizes here. I think we left Inquisitions, cut Thoughtseizes. That seems correct for similar reasons as we would against other small creature decks like we saw against humans. What else did we do? So these were the 5 that were for sure in, so that puts us at 60, and then from there it gets a little bit more down to taste. So I think what we did here is we cut away... Well, this is actually a really good question. We probably didn't bring in too much else. I might have even gone down on more Inquisitions. So let's say we cut an Inquisition here and probably brought in another Nile Spellbomb. I think we had 2 of those for sure in. And then from there, I couldn't really necessarily nail down exactly what I think is best because I haven't seen their list. So without full knowledge of what's probably likely to be in their list, I don't think we want the fringe stuff like Cage and Deathmark. I think 2 Spellbomb is fine. So this Engineered Explosives, you could take it or leave it. If you rate it highly enough to come in, it can come in. Maybe cutting away... yet another Lily of the Veil, but I don't know how good that is. Maybe it's better than Collective Brutality. This is a tough one. Maybe it's better than a trophy. I don't know. I could see that, actually. I could see that being better than a trophy, but it's a bit tough to say, but something like that is going to be fine against a Mardu Aristocrats deck. But again, this is not a common deck. This is not really a solved archetype, so you have to go more by what you see, what you have seen, than anything else. So that's what we did here. Let's see how it treats us in Game 2. Alright, my friends, Game 2 on the draw against Mardu Aristocrats, and our hand is fine. Again, we don't know exactly what it looks like, what their deck list looks like, but we have a little bit of grave interaction, we have a removal spell, we have a couple pretty decent threats, and yeah, that Blooming Marsh was actually a pretty good draw, because this makes it more likely that we'll be able to curve out without having to take turn 1 off to play Hissing Quagmire. So that's what we did. They've got a couple black-white duels, and they're going to play a Tithe Taker, so they've got all kinds of new spice in here. This guy's a 2/1 that is going to tax our spells and our abilities, activated abilities, by 1 as long as it's their turn. He also has Afterlife 1. He's going to make a black and white flying spirit token when he dies. So very, very annoying card, all things considered, and that makes me want to just play out my Hissing Quagmire. I'm not going to spend my brutality on that, for sure. So, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, bit of a pain. We're getting hit for 2. You got it. Alright, we're flooding out on lands, so I think the pretty clear play here to me is to kill the Thalia with a Collective Brutality. She's not someone we care about that much, but I think it's still better to kill her than to kill the Tithe Taker, that's for sure. And we'll pitch one of our more painful lands here, just to drain them for 2 as well. So they play a Cavern of Souls naming Vampire, and here comes the namesake card of the deck, Falconwrath Aristocrat. 4/1. Flying Haste can sack a creature to get indestructible if it's a human, which we've seen they play a nice strong human sub-theme, along Bloodsoaked Champion is human as well. She gets a counter if it's a human that she eats. So very, very good against us in this particular window when played on curve. So I think our highest upside play here is Kalidas. We really want to be able to stabilize with our life total, and also hopefully rip a removal spell and start getting good value out of him. So unfortunately they do have a Path to Exile, which does punish us for playing Kalidas instead of Tracker, but they got another Cavern of Souls, and they've got Kaya, Orzhov Usurper. Yet another new card, so this is a really, really interesting brew our opponent's working with over there. They're going to clean up our graveyard. They don't get to gain life there, but they do get to clock us for 6, so this is a very big problem. And we draw Scavenging Ooze. Not the greatest here. I do think we need to play the Tracker into Blooming Marsh. Like, playing the Ooze there lets us eat Thalia, right? In Gain a Life, but we basically need to get our clue cracked as soon as possible, trying to desperately find answers to what's going on. But, you know, with our hand and with their hand, I don't think any sequence that we did was going to win, because a couple Path to Exiles in the context of what else is going on is just pretty unbeatable. Now, if we had brutality'd them escalating to check the hand, maybe we could have snagged a path and the game would be different. But I don't think, you know, against an Aristocrats deck, I think it's better to drain them for 2 on average, especially based on what we saw Game 1. We didn't really see any instants or sorceries from them Game 1. So Kaya keeps ticking up, clearing out our graveyard fuel. The Tithe Taker is taxing us out of activating our clue here, I believe, so we activate the Spell Bomb instead, just to cantrip, basically. Tireless Tracker, a little late to the party. Lily the Last Hope, also a little bit late to the party. We're going to play her and hope they are not paying attention, basically. But They will respond, they sack her, they grow her, they get the afterlife. We're going to crack a clue to try to play in response to all this, but we just find a land, so we are just dead. I'm not sure exactly why, but I kept playing stuff out. I frankly probably should have just concealed information here, but again, we're like making them do things correctly. We're making them execute the victory, and they just ult Kaya for the kill, which is a stylish way to win. They her -5 deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards that player owns in exile, and you gain that much life. So absolutely wrecked here in terms of life totals game 2 by the Aristocrats. We couldn't handle the Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. That's the card that actually beats us. Yeah, they've got some cute stuff. They've got some value along the way, but the Falcon Wrath Aristocrat for the clock and those Path to Exiles taking care of Kalidas and Tracker, that's what won them the game. So we got curved out on, and not much we could have done about it, so let's move on to game 3. Alright, my friends, here against Mardu Aristocrats, game 3, and we've got a bit of a clunker on our hands, but it is a keeper. It functions. It's got the turn 1 Spellbomb, which, as we saw last game, did not accomplish all that much, but is still a fine card to play turn 1, and we do know they have more graveyard interaction in the deck. You know, they could be on Lingering Souls. We don't still really know what's in here. So they go Godless Shrine and pass. Unfortunately, we are not exactly drawing the lands we need to see, nor have we managed to put anything in the yard. So we just play a Scooz instead of one of our Tarmogoyfs, and we will pass. Opponent's got a Thalia. That's bad because we're clunky on our lands here, and we draw Nile Spellbomb. Yikes. Very, very much not... Our draws have not complied with us, so we cannot Brutality the Thalia. She's taxing us out of that. We have a couple options here. We can play a 0/1 Tarmogoyf and pass. Now that's mana efficient. Or we can crack a Spellbomb just to draw, hope we find another land, and then we can either play a Tarmogoyf that's at least slightly bigger, or we can play another Spellbomb for 2. So I think that it is correct to crack the Spellbomb here. We draw Fatal Push, which is a fine card in general, but very, very punished here for now missing a land for 3 straight draw steps. Thalia begins the clock. She's first striking, so we can do nothing about it. And they've got another Tithe Taker. We draw Dark Confidant, so we still break on lands, and I think we are supposed to play the Bob there. Like, we have to... We just have to draw lands. We just have to draw lands. So, Tithe Taker and Thalia are both big enough to just attack into our stuff here. But what can you do? They're going to go get a Sacred Foundry. They've got a Cavern. They name human, so for a second I had some hope, but nope, it's the Falcon Wrath Aristocrat again. Very beautiful curve out on their side of things while we are stuck on 2 lands. I feel like I have no choice but to take a trade here. The Scooz might not be that useful anyway, with only 1 green source for now, so I'm pretty happy to take any trade that I can, and that's the only trade that's available to me, so that's the one we took. Dark Confidant is showing us at least something painless, and at least it's a land, but we are still stuck on 2 mana. Just desperately unlucky here to keep a 2-lander and still only have access to 2 mana by the time turn 3 rolls around, and we just don't have a good play here. I'll play a Tarmogoyf because it clogs up the ground, but, like, we cannot Collective Brutality. The only other thing we could do is Fatal Push the Thalia, which is an option, I guess, but, like, I don't know. I think we need to try to... just play out to the board here. Like, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other in that case. But they've just got another Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. Absolutely brutal here. Absolutely brutal. They get in for 9 in the air. There is nothing we can do. And we're down to 3. So our best out here, our only real out, potentially, is Bob finding us a land. And even that wouldn't do it, actually. I was going to say, Bob finds us a land and our draw for turn is Languish. But even then, the Thalia tax gets us. So maybe we were supposed to push the Thalia last turn with that in mind, but of course we didn't know they would have another Falconwrath Aristocrat off the top, right? So anyway, we are pretty dead, but let's see what Bob draws us. Well, Bob's going to go ahead and hit our Languish for us and just put us out of our misery. So we got rocked by a Mardu Aristocrats deck. Don't think this is necessarily supposed to be this bad of a matchup for us. I don't exactly know how bad it should be. I do know that they look like they're pretty well geared up to punish spot removal and punish interaction in some different ways. Like, they can tax it. They've got a couple different ways to tax it. They can recur some stuff. They can protect this thing, make it indestructible. All that's true. But really, the fact that they found... I don't think they have a great clock outside of these Falconwrath Aristocrats. And the fact that they found these Aristocrats on curve both games, including 2 of them here in the 3rd game while we were stuck on land, yeah, that's what lost us the game. So very, very disappointing when we were, when we ran into an untiered deck and we took game 1 against it. I was just kind of ready. I was just kind of ready to move to 3-1. But they got us. The Falconwrath Aristocrat absolutely put us in our place, showed us where we belong in the social hierarchy. We are not aristocrats, and they are. So we got wrecked. Pretty unlucky, I'd say, to get wrecked. But we had some really nutty draws in at least game 2 against Eldrazi-tron. So it's not like the luck is all blowing. The winds of luck are not all blowing against us or anything. But man, that one felt a little bit rough. But it happens, and it's cool to lose to a new brew like this with a ton of new tech from the Ravnica block. So fair play to the opponent. Cool deck, good games, and well done. And yeah, let's move on to round 5. Alright, my friends, we are here for round 5 of the competitive league that we've been playing, and we are playing to go positive. We're 2-2, looking for that positive, looking to cash the league. Right, so our hand is sweet. Pretty sweet for a blind game 1, I must say. We will keep it, and we will be on the play. And here I literally just misclicked. I had my Thought Season, my Inquisition, and I just cast the wrong one. As it turns out, not punished for it because there's no turn 1 play we have to take. We are against either Blue-White or Jeskai Control, and we see Snapcaster Mage, Cryptic Command, Jace the Mind Sculptor. So it is a Thoughtseize. We've got to take one card from the top end, and I chose to take the Jace. I think with our current hand, we have a decent shot of playing around the Cryptic. It's obviously always going to get them some value, but I think Jace hitting the board is potentially worse for us. We'll have to see how that plays out, but that was my choice. They lead on the Colonnade. We draw Skoos, okay? So here, I do want to Inquisition, get that Snapcaster out of their Mage while Inquisition is good. This is one way in which I was punished for misclicking. But we still get to have a good turn by playing Treetop Village. Getting an early Treetop down is very nice. So the opponent's going to play another Colonnade, which they did not have in hand, and pass. So they're flooding, but it's a control deck, so totally fine to flood. Honestly, against a deck like ours especially, where we don't end the game that quickly. So with an eye to starting to try to end the game, we do play the Tarmogoyf there. We don't get to have a particularly mana-efficient turn, but that's fine. Alright, Hissing Quagmire, not the most thrilling draw, but it's not a bad one either. So before they get on Cryptic Command mana, we are going to go for a double attack turn here. And we'll crash in with both Treetop and Tarmogoyf. Looks like they might have something to say about it. They are a Jeskai deck, so they Fetch and Shock for Esteem Vents, they bolt the Treetop. This is actually okay for us, right? Because we're a bit flooded ourselves. Them dealing with the Treetop is something they kind of had to do, but look, they had to Fetch and Shock to do so, and it grew the Goyf by 2. So they just took a ton of damage there. And on top of that, we get to have a mana-efficient turn, play another manland, so that felt pretty good. That said, they are now at Cryptic Command mana, and here's where things get dangerous. Respecting the prospect of Cryptic Command, we do just move to attacks here without firing up Quagmire. Crash in for 5, And they're going to take it. You know, no cryptic bounce quite yet, at least, so sure. So, obviously there's some concern whether or not to play this. We're playing it into a known cryptic. We also could be, you know, scared of a Wrath effect, whether it be Terminus or whether they've got a more, you know, Supreme Verdict style build, but I do think we want to be proactive and play that, so you could go either way. But, you know, if they counter it, I don't care, really. So they're going to counter and bounce. I think they were supposed to counter and draw there, because, like, they know we have the mana to just replay the Tarmogoyf. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We already got our attack in, so that's totally fine with me. They don't accrue card advantage that way, and that's very important for us. So, I'm very happy that I played the Ooze, drawing out the Cryptic for counter and bounce. Totally fine with me. They have a Detention Sphere. Obviously, we're worried about Teferi. Literally Teferi. Like, even Jace bouncing the Goyf, we can... You know, Jace would, of course, be good. They maybe set up a better draw or a Terminus or something, but Jace unsummon still gets them got by the Hissing Quagmire, right? So, D-Sphere is a pretty good play for them, but it's not as scary as Teferi would have been. That is for certain. So, Maelstrom Pulse is going to be the way to free our Goyf. So, in order to do that and still have a mana-efficient turn, we're going to Field of Ruin first, take care of one of these Colonnades, which we need to take care of at some point anyway. Need to start chewing through those whenever we can. And then we'll try to pulse away the D-Sphere. They floated mana, but we're going to move out of that phase, so they have to let the mana expire or use it. And then we get to try to pulse, and the pulse works, so great. We get our Tarmogoyf back. They are at 7 life, but, you know, technically they're facing lethal. In practice, not so much, because they can fire up a Colonnade, but still, we've got a lot of good stuff on board. They're going to shock in, so Colonnade is the play. So here, Liliana of the Veil is a really interesting draw, and this is a really interesting spot. So obviously we can move to attacks with a Tarmogoyf and see what they do. If they've got a Cryptic Command, fine. If they just fire up the Colonnading Chump Block, fine. If they're on stuff like that, then playing the Liliana in the second main is actually decent. There is a reason, though, I think, to play her in the first main phase, and that's if they're sitting on a piece of counter magic that's not Cryptic Command, right? Because if it's not Cryptic Command, they have to let the Liliana resolve, basically. Otherwise, they are going to, if they counter her, they grow the Goyf. And I thought, well, maybe they won't even notice that. Maybe they're just going to counter her, and then the Goyf is even more lethal than it already was. Like, growing the Goyf here is actually pretty huge. Like, with Lightning Helixes floating around and stuff, like, every point of damage matters. So, you could have argued for either way, and maybe I should have sandbagged her a little bit, but I did choose to run her out main phase. So they are going to have the best possible counter, which is, of course, Snap into Cryptic. It leaves the body behind. Very, very useful. Perfect mana efficiency on their part as well. But once again, they're going to bounce the Tarmogoyf. Now, here it does make a little bit more sense to bounce the Goyf, because I have not attacked yet. So I did get kind of punished for playing her main phase. Maybe it was better to move to attacks first, but regardless, we've got our Goyf back. They are on the ropes, but they have a better chance to have stabilized right now. Nile Spellbomb, that's an okay draw. I'm pretty interested in running that out in case of other Snapcasters, right? So, once again, respecting Cryptic Command and how bounce-happy they are with Cryptic, I'm just attacking with Goyf. We want to be able to replay it if it gets bounced this turn. They're just going to chump. And yeah, I still sandbag the Swamp. It's good for a lot of reasons to sandbag it. And there's no need to get aggressive with the Spellbomb cracks, because Snapcaster is one of the best draws they could have. However, Hieroglyphic Illuminations getting cashed in for 2 could be a bit of a problem. But no more land drops, so they've clearly got some action. We draw Scavenging Ooze, that's alright. It's an alright one. So here, I am going to get aggressive. We're going to move to attacks. If they have another Cryptic Command, I'm punished for this. Otherwise, this is a pretty good play. And we'll see what they have. So, here comes this stuff. They've got another Snapcaster Mage, so I'm very glad I've been patient with a Spellbomb here. They target Lightning Bolt, we respond to the trigger. clean out their graveyard. We've still got a ton of types in our own. For a brief moment in time, Tarmogoyf is a 7/8. And then we're going to clear out their graveyard, and he's a 5/6. Still pretty good. Still lethal. Still a lethal attack from the Goyf. So, Abrupt Decay is an okay draw, not the best. They get to Helix the Quagmire. That's quite good. That's quite good. So now they could, in theory, afford to let the Tarmogoyf through, but they're still going to take the chump block, which is probably correct. But, you know, they're at 8 life. You know, they're some way toward being stabilized. We've still got the Goyf chugging along. They're going to pass another Tarmogoyf. Sure. So obviously we just attack first here. No reason to do anything else. They've got nothing. So they go down to 2. We're going to try a Scavenging Ooze first. It's got a little bit potentially higher upside if it lives, right? Because it can grow big enough to tangle with a Celestial Colonnade. It can blank their Snapcasters, and if they do have some kind of a sweeper effect, we kind of want this other Tarmogoyf to rebuild with. That's my thinking with leading on the Skoos at least, but let's see what they do. Alright, so they're going to tap low to Logic Not It. I can't pay for it, so my Ooze gets countered, and here I just decide to go for it. I just decide to play my other Tarmogoyf and say, can you beat 2 Tarmogoyfs when you're at 2 life? Obviously, this is bad if they have a Terminus or anything like that. But otherwise, they're going to struggle to answer it, and they just shock in a Sacred Foundry to end the game on their own terms, which I respect. So, I think a big turning point of the game was when they decided to counter-bounce the Tarmogoyf the first time they Cryptic Commanded instead of counter-draw. If they had gone counter-draw, now granted, they don't know that I had nothing better to do with my turn than replay the Tarmogoyf, so with all due respect to that, they didn't have perfect information or anything. But, you know, if they just start that card advantage train a little bit earlier, might have been a pretty different game. But as things were, we were able to disrupt them early, to put some early pressure on, and, you know, to keep just forcing them to answer Tarmogoyfs. They were able to stall it, but ultimately not to deal with it. And we got there on the back of Goyfs. So, good times. Feels great to beat Jeskai Control. It is a tough matchup, but let's go to Game 2 and see how we side against them first. Then we'll move on to the game after that. Alright, my friends, here we are, sideboarding against Jeskai Control. You've seen me do this before, but we're just going to go over it again. We no longer have a choke to bring in this 75. We have changed it with the February deck tech, but we have our good friends, the Fulminator Mage, ×3. Awesome cards here. Nissa Vital Force, great against Control. Other Planeswalker, Liliana the Last Hope, also quite good. Specifically against Jeskai, quite good, compared to Blue-White. Same is true for Kitchen Finks. Kitchen Finks is not something we really want against Blue-White now that they're on the Terminus plan heavily, but against the more spot removal heavy deck, Finks is pretty good. Collective Brutality is another good one. Nile Spellbombs are maybes. Maelstrom Pulse is also pretty solid. So we've got a lot to consider. Those cards are, a couple more Spellbombs are a little bit more questionable, but we've got a lot to consider, so let's bring out a lot here. Fatal Push can come out wholesale, Abrupt Decay comes out. We probably want to cut at least one Scavenging Ooze, maybe more. Kalitas is questionable, we'll consider another Ooze. And this is a matchup where we can cut a land as well. So we've got these 8 cards for sure coming in. That puts us at 61. So I think we can say, alright, we can lean just on one Skoos. One Skoos is fine. We'll cut the Kalitas as well and bring in a second Spellbomb, leave the third one on the bench. I think this is a pretty good setup against Jeskai. I think this is probably optimized for our 75, and it's a little bit of a mess, so let's just sort by CMC to show you what's what. Yeah, looks something like that. So we've got a lot of really powerful things to do post-side against a deck that is a tough matchup for us, but we've come prepared for it. So let's go to Game 2, see how we do. Alright, my friends. Jeskai Control, and it's Game 2. We're on the draw. Our hand is sweet. It's got interaction of all kinds, and it's got the top end. It kind of lacks the things that are in between, though. Nissa Vital Force is a heck of a card, but we don't necessarily want to see her in the opener, right? But our opponent's going to keep 7. We're definitely not throwing this hand back. It can get a lot of work done. So, opponent goes Flooded Strand Pass. We draw Treetop Village. Alright, that's a good draw, actually. So, we definitely want to lead on the Inquisition here because there's just a window where it can start whiffing. The Thoughtseize we might be incentivized to sandbag a little bit longer, but let's see what they have. So they kept a 2-lander that does stone cold nothing right now. One of the other land is Field of Ruin, so they cannot cast these Logic Knots, which require double blue. The only spell they'll be able to cast is Path to Exile, but right now we don't even have a creature in our hand. We just have manlands. So their hand does stone cold nothing. So let's think down the road a little bit. Electrolyze, of course, Path to Exile. I think we can leave the path, because the first path is usually fine for us, and we have a lot of manlands. It's not like we lack threats. It's not like if they path our one thing, we can never attack again. Electrolyze, they need to hit some kind of specific mana to play, maybe, and in other words, if they draw like a fetch, they're trying to get Logic Knot and Path and Electrolyze online, it's not necessarily going to cover all 3 bases. And Electrolyze, again, right now doesn't have the most appetizing targets on our side to hit, so I think we take the Logic Knots both because they could be the best early, and we're looking to resolve our Nissa at some point. So I took a Logic Knot, and I will pass. Opponent's leaving their fetch uncracked because they don't want to thin their deck out. They're going to play that field, and they pass. So if they had found another land, they almost certainly would have played that. Liliana the Last Hope. Now that's a pretty good draw. That's good enough to make me want to Thoughtseize now and clear the path for her. So they just found another Electrolyze. We're just going to take away that other Logic Knot and leave them really desperate for something good off the top. So the lands they need. But even so, they might struggle with this Lily. We play our Hissing Quagmire so we can cast her on curve next turn, and they don't hit a land. So, good times for us. We get to play our Field of Ruin, and unless they drew like a Spell Pierce or a Mana Leak, our Lily resolves. So, this would be better as a Veil, but we're pretty happy with this, for sure. We're happy with this. Very, very nice. So, they're finally going to fetch. They're going to shock. And they're going to flash in a Snapcaster Mage. Now, I understand why they did this, because they've got to pressure a Planeswalker, but unless they draw a land that can cast Electrolyze next turn, or they draw like a Lightning Bolt, they actually cannot pressure her off the field. And more than that, she can cleanly kill the Snap, right? So they're going to knock her down to 2, and they're just going to scoop, because apparently they didn't hit the land they needed for Electrolyze. And then they're just in deep trouble. They're still behind on lands. Lily gets to stick around, tick up, kill their Snapcaster, amazing value. And they don't know this, but we're going to get to go track her into land and then maybe turn 5 Nissa. So that was an absolute beating that we gave Jeskai control there in Game 2. They did get stuck on lands, but we took full advantage of it by crippling their hand and finding a really good curve through turns 3, 4, 5. So absolutely wonderful to finish on a high note like that, taking down Jeskai control. So, reviewing the league, Humans is a pretty 50-50 matchup in my opinion, and it was a very tight and fun and close game like it always was, but we came away with the win. Then we faced... let's talk about our other 2 wins, Eldrazi Tron and Jeskai Control. These are both solidly unfavored in my opinion. Certainly Jeskai is solidly unfavored. I would also venture to say Eldrazi Tron is a pretty good favorite against us. So... none of our wins were free wins. None of them were good matchups. We beat a 50-50 and we beat 2 unfavorable ones, and in both unfavorable matchups, mind you, we kind of showed them the business, especially in Game 2, and we got the 2-0, so that was great. Now for our 2 losses, one of them was against the literal toughest tier deck for us in the format, in the form of Valakut, and we still almost got there. We took them to Game 3, and they were down on the ropes at 3 life before they stabilized with Summoner's Pact and a Tracker and then ripping an Obstinate Baloth off the top. Hey, that's about as much as we can ask for against a deck like Valakut, short of actually stealing the win. And then there was the Mardu Aristocrats deck, which, maybe their favorite against us. I don't really know. It's not a deck you see all that often, that is for sure. But very spicy, very cool deck. Take nothing away from the opponent. But yeah, we stumbled, we struggled, we got curved out on by the Taxers into the Falconwrath Aristocrats in both games 2 and 3 that we lost. And yeah, I don't imagine that's necessarily a favorable matchup for us, so I don't claim that with any authority. So guys, we faced, probably either 3 or 4 unfavorable matchups, some of them being really severely unfavorable, and we still came away with a 3 and 2. The 3 and 2s feel just a tad underwhelming, because I opened with my first ever live recorded competitive league on this channel with a 5-0. That was almost a curse, right? Because it's all downhill from there. You can't possibly match that on a regular basis. But we are continuing to put up very, very solid results. We are now, with the 4 leagues we've played with Dark Confidant decks on this channel, we are 15 and 5. And I haven't played other competitive leagues that I haven't showed you. That's all I've done since I switched to Bob for comp leagues. So 15 and 5 across all of the comp league games we've played. Certainly facing a high density of tough matchups along the way, just like we saw here, and we are still getting it done. So I'm very, very pleased with how the deck has performed. Got nothing bad to say about it. The 4th Liliana of the Veil has seemed like a good change to me. She has been very nice in a lot of matchups. She's been very, very nice. She almost stole us the game against Titan Shift, and she did indeed get us game 1 against Titan Shift. She's nice against the Eldrazi. She's nice in a lot of stuff. She's really, really, really well positioned right now, in my opinion, compared to how she was in the recent past. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this replay format. I think overall people probably lean toward liking the live recorded stuff better, but I'm gonna do my best to do both, because like today, it just made more sense for me to play all these games more or less back to back, which is what I did. But I knew I had to take at least one break somewhere in there, so it didn't make sense to live commentate the whole thing, and it also didn't make sense to just record only one at a time and stop to upload it and everything else. So I will continue to use the replay function. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoyed the gameplay here. As always, everybody, let me know what you thought about the lines, what you thought about the decisions, what you thought about the matchups, everything. I'd love to hear it. So thanks, as always, for watching. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. Once again, we're thanking Teddy for upgrading to the tier list here. Awesome. Very, very cool of you, my friend. And thanks to everybody who supports this channel in any way you can. Remember, please subscribe if you're not subscribed, and stay tuned to the channel. We've got, as always, more great content coming down the pipeline for you, and I will see you for the next video. I hope you have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon.